So you bought yourself your brand new whisper room and you set it up and you got inside for the first time and you went to record your voiceover and you went, oh, this doesn't sound as good as I hoped it would. It's quiet, but now it sounds like I'm talking from the middle of my bathroom. Well, that's because the next thing you need to do after you've set up your whisper room is to treat it acoustically. So I'm going to show you how I've treated mine, and we'll make it sound much better for our nice, dry, dead-sounding voiceovers. So the stuff we're going to use is called Owens Corning 703. You can look it up on Amazon. You can buy it lots of different places. You might be able to get it at a local hardware store or have them order it. But essentially, it is rigid fiberglass insulation. And I'm going to suggest that you get the 4-inch thick. There's also a 2-inch and a 1-inch thick version. But the thicker the insulation, the more it's going to absorb. So by getting it at 4 inches thick, you're going to have the maximum possible absorption. And it absorbs best in the bass frequencies. So if you're a male with a lower voice, this is really going to help you with any of those standing waves in your lower register. If you have a high voice, you might be able to get away with thinner, but I would suggest at least doing some of it with 4-inch thick. The only other things you're going to need a dust mask. This stuff is fiberglass. It does make dust. So you're going to really want to protect yourself. So I got this one, 3-Tech one, paint sanding valved respirator, and it says used for relief from insulating particles. So the small stuff, you want, whenever you're handling this stuff, you really want to use a mask. Don't risk your moneymaker, right? Get a mask. The only other thing we need is a knife. That's the other great thing about 703 is it cuts very easily. You just cut it with a razor knife. And because it's rigid, you don't need to build any boxes or frames or anything like that. You can just stand it in and friction fit it into your walls. So I have 2 panels that are just about a 1/4 inch wider than the booth itself. And with a little bit of Lego, a little bit of friction, we're going to be able to just fit these in and close it like a book and fit these 2 panels right in so that they stay in place. Now I'll go back and I'll fix these, but that's essentially the way it is. And you're just going to do that for 2 of the walls and the ceiling. And that's the best way to just guarantee that you're going to absorb all of the different frequencies. So just measure them out, and I'll show you how it cuts. This stuff cuts very easily. Anytime you need to cut 703, the easiest way is to just draw a chalk line or use a Sharpie, and it cuts very easily. Very straightforward. It's like cutting styrofoam or something. It just cuts very easily. Just drag it straight down, do another side, and it will come right apart. Very easy to work with as long as you have your dust mask and your knife. So I'm going to modify what I said before about the only things you'll need a couple of other things. Once you're doing the installation, whenever you're working with this installation stuff, it probably is a good idea to wear long sleeves because this stuff is kind of splintery. I've done this before. It hasn't bothered me, but don't let me be the person who tells you not to observe all safety things. And then you'll probably need a couple thin things. This is just a couple of shims paint stirrer. What I've done is I had gone to the fabric store and gotten a couple of yards of some different fabrics because you want to cover this stuff up so none of the lint that's in there, none of the fibers, once it's installed, you want the fibers to stay there and not end up in your booth. So I had gotten a couple of yards of fabric. I got a light color for the top and I just got black for the walls. Cheap stuff from Walmart. Just get it nice and tightly woven. That way the fibers from the insulation don't come through. But essentially all I'm doing is taking the fabric and I'm using my shim to just push it up in between the wall and the insulation. And I'll just go do that the whole way around until it gets fit nice and tightly all the way around. And so I've started with the ceiling. I'm not sure if you can see the ceiling, but the ceiling now has the insulation in it that's just friction fit. There's two pieces that are just butted up next to each other, just ever so slightly larger. I also cut a little hole for the ventilation. So that's where the vent is for the ventilation. So I want to make sure I had some room for that. I usually don't ventilate while I'm in there. So it doesn't really have to be super big because the ventilation itself makes noise. I don't record ever with the ventilation on because you can hear it. But that's what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to wrap it around the top there. So I just get a nice sort of trying to get a finished edge around it. So work on that for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and see what we have. Show you what I've done. So I just took some fabric, wrapped it under, and then used my little shims to just make sure I have the fabric pushed up there nice and tight. The friction of the fiberglass against the edge is what keeps it all in place. So I've made no modification to the booth whatsoever. This is all just held up there by friction. Now I'll support it a little bit more because the next layer is going to go here, and that's going to hold these two corners up. And that's what we'll do. So I'll just work on the next two sections, and I'll show you what it looks like next before we put the fabric on. Okay, so now we have the back completed with the OC 703. So the next thing that I'll do is I'll get my fabric and just tuck that in. Same process before. I'm just going to tuck it around both edges. So all I've done is I started to tuck the black fabric that I bought, just tuck it around all the 703 that's in there. And I'll work on the wrinkles once I get the last wall in, then we'll work on all the wrinkles. So the next thing to do is we're going to do this wall. Okay, no magic here. Got the last wall in, just made my cutouts for my top and bottom vent. And I just got everything pieced together. Sort of ran out of some big pieces, so I'm just jigsaw puzzling together all the stuff that I have left. And so now the last thing to do for this wall is to cover this one with the black fabric. Okay, and there you have it, black wall number 2. So now we have 3 full walls. Oh, I guess I have some wrinkles to take out there. But we have 3 full walls that are now sound insulated. So let's set the mic back up before we still got some cleanup to do, but let's set the mic back up and see what we have. Okay, so now we're in our treated booth. 3 walls completely covered with 4 inches of OC 703. And already you can hear what an enormous difference this makes. So now there's no standing waves. There are no rogue bass notes. There's none of that echoiness or boominess that's anywhere in this booth. We'll do some good listening back. We'll really listen to the way our recordings sound, and if we like the way they sound, then we're done. If we still hear things that we need to take control of, there's not too much more that we can do other than adding more or trying to tweak where things are. I'm actually really happy so far with what I'm hearing with the way this sounds, so I think that I'm going to run with this particular setup for a while. I will probably mess around with the mic placement. So right now I'm facing a window, so I'm getting a little reflection off that window. I could also try and point the mic back into that corner. Just as I turn my own head and listen to the way I sound, it sounds much different facing the window, a little bit brighter, than if I turn my head and face it into the corner. It sounds absolutely dead, like I'm talking into an abyss, like there's no echo, there's no anything. So what I'll do is I'll practice a couple of different mic placements, see what sounds best, and that will be what I run with for the future. Nice thing about these booths is once you have it set up like this, you can tweak the mic placement for whatever it is you need. So if I needed a dead sound that was extra dead, I could put the mic back here. If I wanted a sound that was a little brighter, I could face the window. Everything is movable now. And the beautiful thing about this is I've made no modifications whatsoever to the booth. If I want to sell the booth, if I want to upgrade to another booth, this booth, I can take it apart, take the insulation out. I just mark the panels that I have in here, and I'm ready to move. I can take this with me. I've made no structural changes to the booth whatsoever. So that really illustrates the importance of treating your booth. If your booth came with a couple of sheets of that egg crate, that is probably not enough to suppress the echoes that are present in the booth. You need thickness and mass to absorb those bass frequencies that are in everybody's voice, especially in particular the male voiceover artist. You need weight. You need thickness to absorb those frequencies. So I hope this helps. Mike DelGaudio, MikeDelGaudio.com. If you have any voiceovers that you'd like me to do, please give us a ring. But otherwise, happy recording, and I look forward to hearing what your booth sounds like.